Austin versus Dallas, the great debate. It's not really a debate, at least for people outside of Texas, or really, I guess, even in Texas. It's not like we just talk to our neighbor and say, hey, you know, which one's better? But when you're moving or you're relocating and you need to find out which one is best for you, then it absolutely becomes a debate, even if it's an internal debate. And in this video, we're just gonna go over the 10 things you must know about both of the places in relation to each other, how they compare and contrast, and ultimately help you arrive at a decision that is best for you. So, if that's what you clicked on this video to find out, stay tuned. Hello again, everybody. If this is your first time to the channel, my name is Frank. I'm part of a team at the award-winning J.B. Goodwin Brokerage right here in Austin, Texas. We put out tons of new content every week about what it's like living in Austin, Texas, whether it's comparisons of cities and states like this one. We also do vlog tours of certain areas and neighborhoods. We do pros and cons, cost of living, you name it, we do it, and it's what we love to do. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel for more and ring the little bell so that you're notified each time we put out a new video. We've had such a blast ever since we started this YouTube channel, and we've been loving the reach outs we've been getting from all over the place, a lot of international people, which is pretty cool. And what we love to do is make that transition as easy as possible, get you in that perfect place for either yourself or your family. All you've got to do is move, and we take care of the rest, whether it's finding you the place to live here or even helping list your house wherever you're moving from. So if that applies to you, be sure to reach out to us. Give us a call, shoot us a text, send us an email, any time of day, any day of the week. We've got your back when moving to Austin, Texas. And again, it's what we love to do. It's what we're good at doing, so we do it. All right, if you saw my thumbnail, you've probably guessed it. Coming in at number 1 to start the list is that Austin really is the California of Texas. We've got our avocado toast, we've got the yoga, we've got the outdoorsy activities, we've got the healthy lifestyle, we've got the crystal shops, we've got the tacos, we've got the hipsters, we've got the art scene, we've got the music scene, we've got the long beards and the IPAs, and definitely a good amount of people who love God's grass. It's not legal yet, and Texas will probably be one of the last states to legalize it, but when there's a will, there's a way. You can walk downtown and get whiffs of it everywhere. And so yeah, Austin really is the California of Texas, partly because so many people who come to Austin are from California. We make all of these kinds of memes about it. It's a running joke among locals. Chances are if you meet someone who's new to Texas and you ask them where you're from, they'll say California, just how it is. So in a big way, a lot of the people here are Californians, which I think by default makes it the California of Texas. In addition to that, costs here are unfortunately skyrocketing, much like living in California, but we'll get to the cost of living a little bit later in this video. Politics is another aspect of Austin that's very much like California, but we'll get to that a little bit later as well. Now, Dallas, on the other hand, is gonna be a lot more Texan. And I'm not saying that everyone there is gonna wear big cowboy hats and drive in these big trucks, although you are gonna see that. And even in Austin, to a certain degree, you are definitely going to see Texans, right? Because it's, I mean, regardless of how California in a certain place is, it's still Texas. There's still a sense of pride. There's still the culture here that shapes everyone and plays a big part in the way we live our lives. But you're gonna see that a lot more in Dallas. It's less of a melting pot of people that come from all over the place. Austin is number 1 in the country right now for relocation hotspots. Really, I mean, everyone's moving here from all over the place, and I'm not saying that's not the case for Dallas, but you're gonna find a lot more people from Texas in Dallas than you're gonna find in Austin. And Dallas, as I mentioned, is going to have just more of a Texan feel, more of an authentic Texan feel, actually. Austin is still authentic, it's very eclectic, it's very artistic, but in its own unique way, whereas Dallas, you really feel like you're in Texas. It's the best way I can describe it. And if it helps paint the picture, I am the proud owner of all, I believe it's 6 seasons of Walker, Texas Ranger, which took place in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Now, granted, that was the 90s. I think it was 93 to maybe 01, although that sounds like 7 or 8 seasons. I'll have to check my collection. But yeah, granted it was a long time ago, it's still, you know, part of the culture, the Texas Rangers, you know what I mean? It's not like a hick town. Dallas is a metropolis, right? It's a humongous part of Texas, and a lot of it is very contemporary, such as the lofts, such as the restaurants and eateries, brunch locations, things like that. But the culture is much more Texan than it is Dallas, and Austin's culture is much more Austin than it is Texas. Quick note on that, Austin, I'm speaking more specifically to the metro area, that downtown area, the heart of the city. Once you get into places like Cedar Park, Leander, even North Austin, Georgetown, Round Rock, San Marcos, Kyle, all of these different surrounding areas and suburbs, then it's gonna be more spread out, it's gonna be a little bit more Texan, everything's gonna be a little bit more mixed and balanced. So keep that in mind. If you're worried about Austin being a little bit too Californian for you, all you really gotta do is get out of that central area and it's much more normal. And on that note, let's go to number 2 on this list, which is the fact that Austin is more touristy and Dallas isn't. And I'm not saying that against Dallas, because if you're a local, what don't you like? Usually tourists. Now, is Austin New York City? Is it Los Angeles? Is it Miami? No, and we know that, but you still get so many tourists here from all over the place. It's very diverse, it's very popular, and much of that is because there are just more things to do here. And I am saying that in favor of Austin, pardon my bias, but here in Austin, the nightlife is very well known. We've got 6th Street, we've got Rainy Street, we've got the Domain. You've also got music festivals, the Reggae Festival, South by Southwest, Austin City Limits, local venues as well. And on top of that, you've got hiking, you've got canoeing, you've got paddleboarding, you've got the shops on South Congress, you've got Kalahari and Round Rock. Largest indoor water park in the nation, by the way. Quite possibly the world, but I'll just say in the nation because I'm unsure about the world part. So naturally, Austin is going to appeal to more tourists. Now, I'm not saying there's nothing to do in Dallas. That would be silly of me. Dallas does have a lot to offer. However, the general vibe, the general mood, the general culture of Dallas is much more business oriented. It's much more like a well-oiled machine. I'm not gonna say it's boring by any means, but I would describe it as a little bit more adult, and that's because Austin is very artsy, Austin is very eccentric, very soulful, very weird. Our catchphrase is keep Austin weird. And first and foremost, Austin was a college town not too long ago, whereas Dallas for decades has been this long-lasting, strong city. And to be honest, I just don't think that the natural thought of Dallas is, ooh, fun, so much as it is with Austin. But like I said, when you're living there, that might be what you prefer. Austin's great for many reasons that I've mentioned, but it is more touristy, and unless you're living outside of the heart of Austin, Texas, you might get tired of that. Whereas Dallas is a little bit more chilled, it's a little bit more laid back. Not that Austin's not laid back either, I don't mean to go back and forth with this, but just something to keep in mind, you know what I mean? And there are many more benefits to Dallas that I'll mention a little bit later in this video. Now, before we move on, be sure to comment down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? I don't claim to be an expert, so let me know what you think down below, as well as any questions you might have for us or ideas for future videos we can make for you guys. In addition to that, be sure to like this video as well, as it really helps us grow and tells us that we're doing a great job providing value for you guys. And by the way, if you're wanting more in-depth analysis of Austin and Dallas, we actually put out a video a few weeks ago, Austin versus Dallas, everything you need to know, and we compared the two and how they vary with specific subjects, seeing how they each measure up. So if you can't get enough of the Austin and Dallas conversation, be sure to check that out. I must warn you though, it was an older video and I shot back here, but even further. I was a bit more shy, less comfortable on camera, but thankfully I've come out of my shell just a little bit more with each video we make, so thanks for hanging in there, but be sure to check that out if it interests you. Now, on that note, let's move to number 3 on this list of things to know between the two, and that would be the cultures. I touched on it a little bit, and the culture of Austin, first and foremost, as I said, was a college town. Not too long ago, when my family came here, well, I guess it was a little while ago now, late 90s is when my family moved here originally from Houston, by the way. Austin was still just a college town that was growing. You still feel that today. Now, Austin has grown rapidly. Many would say, including myself, too fast, because now we can't keep up with the population in regards to size and construction and traffic and things of that nature. But yes, Austin really is first and foremost a college town that grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And because of that, as I said, it is going to be more artistic. You're going to have more of a film scene. You're going to have more of the arts here. It's going to be younger. It's going to have more soul. And I can stretch my memory far back enough to recall when Austin was more just county roads. There were less toll roads, less freeways, and most certainly less things to do. Now, I think an interesting part of Austin's evolution is because of its young, radiant, eclectic atmosphere and nature, that is why we've drawn a lot of people from all over the place right here. Specifically people from California. If you haven't heard by now, there's a huge part of Austin that's being called Silicon Hills in comparison to Silicon Valley, because all of these young startup tech companies are coming to Austin, which is really feeding that young, professional, vibrant, alive culture here. Now with Dallas, you could go to the 2010s, the 2000s, the 90s, the 80s, 70s, and I'm not saying nothing will have changed, but it'll still very much be Dallas, Texas. Much of its culture is in sports, which I'll get to. Much of its culture is in oil and gas, defense, etc. Now, if you're watching this and you're wondering which place should I move to, it really does depend on your lifestyle. I'm not saying that Austin isn't great for families, because really once you leave that city area, it's a great place for families. All the suburbs have top-rated schools. We actually put out a video on the safest areas in Austin, Texas for families, so be sure to check that out. But what I will say in favor of Dallas is it does foster more of that family life, more of that traditional life, just more peaceful, more normal, less eclectic, less weird way of living. And the best way I can describe it is contemporary and sophisticated meets Southern Texas living. Something I will mention, which is number 4 on this list, is that Dallas is the wealthier of the two. To be specific, Dallas actually has $69,710 million households and is projected to add 43,638 all within the next 5 years. Now, that's not to say that Austin doesn't also have its share of wealth, whether it's Lakeway, whether it's Westlake, the Hill Country, Lake Travis, Lago Vista, Bee Caves, Steiner Ranch, but you do find it more widespread and normal in Dallas. And I'm not saying Dallas is just rich, it's not like Dubai, but yes, it is the wealthier city. So if you are someone who is living quite comfortably and can afford to stretch the budget, you might find more of a luxurious selection within Dallas. One suburb in particular I'd like to mention within Dallas is called Southlake. Now, one of my friends who originally grew up with me here in Austin and would eventually moved to a place called Southlake in Dallas, and time to time I would go and visit him, and I was astonished at just the wealth out there. I heard that the Jonas Brothers had a house out there. For some of the younger viewers, it's crazy. I would often drive around that area whenever I was there, whether it's by myself with him or his family, and just gaze upon the scenery at the time, and it was full of castles, mansions. I mean, you have luxury here in Austin, and yes, you can find things like that, but this was like a whole area. And I kid you not, it was absolutely some of the most pristine estates that I've really ever seen in my life, especially in Texas. And I would learn it's where a lot of CEOs would actually settle down and have their kids go to high school and things like that. Whereas in Austin, yes, we do have wealth, as I said, but you're not necessarily going to have such a large space of just people who are very well off and wealthy, to be honest. So that is something I just wanted to point out on this list of the 10 things you should know about the two, is that yeah, Dallas is going to be more wealthy. That doesn't mean Austin isn't, but if that's more your selection, if that's more your aim, your focus when you're moving, you might want to give Dallas a look. Alrighty, Roo, coming in at not number 1, not number 2, not number 3, not number 4, but number 5. On the subject of money, let's talk about the jobs. In Dallas, you're going to encounter more jobs along the lines of oil and gas, financial services, defense, corporate America, physicians, manufacturing, and more along those lines. And not to say that Dallas is devoid of tech, because you can actually find quite a decent amount of work in the tech field in Dallas, but that is actually what is Austin's forte. As I mentioned before, all the big tech companies are coming to Austin, swarming it. We've got Facebook, we've got Google, we've got Amazon, we've got Tesla, we've got IBM, we've got Dell, we've got HP, and probably so many more that escape me in the moment. So you really have no shortage of tech jobs, and that's what's bringing a lot of people here, really skyrocketing those relocation numbers that I mentioned. But it's not all tech that we have here, however. A lot of the big jobs in Austin are jobs in healthcare, like at Ascension Seton. That's huge here in Austin. In addition to that, you find a lot of jobs actually in education. That is such a big deal here in Texas, whether it's the award-winning school districts we have or the University of Texas itself, which is the staple of Austin, Texas. And right now I'm hearing a lot of buzz in regards to all the new job listings that are coming out day by day here in Austin, really creating that swarm of people, which really doesn't help with the inventory issue we've got going on here in the country. And if that's not enough, Tesla, like I said, is moving here, and they plan to give out 5,000 new jobs to people. Gonna have a lot of building to do to keep up with that growth. So let's move right along to number 6 on this list, and that would be the subject of sports. Now, sports might seem trivial, they might seem insignificant, but it could be more important to people than you realize. This is where Dallas absolutely blows Austin out of the water. And it's simply because Austin doesn't have a single one professional sports team. It's all about college sports here in Austin, whether it's your college football, your college basketball, college baseball, tennis, soccer. We've got it all in only one university at an amateur level. Not to say they're amateurs, but you know what I mean, not professional. But Dallas, my God, having just one professional sports team would already make it infinitely better than Austin, but alas, it has more than one. Notably, America's team, the Dallas Cowboys, and my favorite, which would be the Dallas Mavericks. I personally am the biggest hoops fanatic you'll ever meet. It's one of my 3 passions in life, I will say. If you want to know the other 2, call me, get to know me personally. But yeah, I grew up an avid basketball fan. I've always been more into professional basketball than college basketball, and I played it for a number of years. I mean, my knees, they pop like crazy at any time I bend them, and that's because I basically lived on the basketball court day in, day out for years. So, you know, my knees are a good 10, 20, 30 years older than I am. The reason I bring that up, however, is because I grew up in Austin. I moved here long ago when I was 3, 4, 5, I don't know, it was the late 90s, I can't do math. Anyways, and being such an avid fan of basketball and professional sports in general, well, professional basketball I should say, I would have loved to go to pro games. How amazing it would have been for me to just drive down to the city with my dad, with my family, with my friends, and snag some tickets and catch whatever game was happening that night. But no, the closest option I had if I wanted to see professional sports, specifically basketball, would be San Antonio, and they have the San Antonio Spurs. But no, I mean, yes, I have attended a couple of Spurs games in my life, but far and few, and it's just really a hassle. You know, you have to really plan your weekend around it. It's a much more of an event because you're really going out of town. I mean, San Antonio, to really get to the downtown area where the AT&T Center is, that's 2 hours from Austin. And if I wanted to see the Houston Rockets with Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming when they were popular, that would have been 3 hours. If I wanted to see Dirk in the 2000s in his prime, that would have been 4 hours. However, now I'm really considering going to Dallas to see the Mavericks because I love their team as it currently stands, and I'm an adult who makes his own money now, and I'm self-employed, so I might actually make that happen. But I shouldn't have to, that's my point. I shouldn't have to drive hours out of my city to see my favorite team. Another reason I bring this up is because sports, as trivial as it may seem as a subject, sports bring people together. Whether it's something you do with your spouse, whether it's something you do with your children, your parents, I mean, whatever it may be, sports is a beautiful way of uniting people within their own families and uniting strangers and turning strangers into families. And when COVID hit, I guess I speak for myself, but hopefully a lot of you out there, losing the luxury that I guess we took for granted of going to these sports events was really a bummer, because a lot of that American, patriotic, I don't want to say patriotic, a lot of the American culture is defined through sports. And it might not be your thing if you're watching this, but if it is your thing, you know what I'm talking about. It really is something important that might be a part of your daily life wherever you're moving from. And if you are torn between Dallas and Austin, I've got to keep it real. Forget about Austin if you're into pro sports. Look only at Dallas, maybe Houston if you want even more selection. But that's something you gotta know. One of the 10 things on this list, sports, bar none, choose Dallas. Sorry, Austin, and I'm a local. Anyways, number 7 is gonna be the subject of traffic. Now, a lot of people in today's world are learning they can work remotely from home, and that has really influenced a lot of what we've seen in real estate, commercial going down, residential going up, people relocating all the time because, hey, I can work from home right out of my office. But if you're not one of those people, fear not, we can address the subject of traffic if you are going to be commuting. And I'll tell you right now, straight away, Austin loses. Austin really grew, as I mentioned before, too rapidly in terms of its population, and the city itself in terms of size just can't keep up. I've said this story before in a couple other videos, and I'll say it again, but maybe I'll condense it a little bit more this time. I lived in Los Angeles for about a year. I moved early 2017, came back mid 2018. And before I moved to Los Angeles, it was my spread my wings phase. Before I moved to Los Angeles, the traffic here, yes, each year I would notice it is getting a little worse. It is getting a little worse. But in the time I was gone and then coming back home, I noticed a lot of the roads I would always take were backing up noticeably earlier than they would before. Roads that wouldn't back up until maybe 4 or 5, the usual rush hour time, started to get jammed at 2:30, 3 o'clock. And I thought, damn, I mean, Austin, I knew Austin was growing, but really, that's just a rapid pace. And the problem is, when Austin can't keep up with the pace, what does it do to try and remedy that? Construction. And I will say, to Austin's credit, they've done a good job of completing the new MOPAC, which is just an expressway, or completing 183 South Toll going towards the airport. That used to be a nightmare. Now you just cruise. And yes, to their credit, the toll road going north as well. That's nice. But those are just the main arteries of Austin. But if you're not using that, and those get backed up too, by the way, don't get me wrong, but it's nicer now. But if you're not using that, Austin now, as early as 2 in the afternoon, even on a weekend, is gonna get backed up. And as I said, the construction makes it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So you're gonna be on the freeway and you're gonna see wrecks because they closed an exit and said to detour this way, but the signs are all haphazard and tilted and off to the side that people don't see them, so they get out of their lanes, there's honking, and it's becoming more of a congested mess. And on that note, I know I mentioned a lot of different places being completed, but at the same time, construction has a way, and I'm sure wherever you're living, if there is construction, you can relate to this. Construction has a way of feeling immortal. It feels like it never ends. And so the more construction there is, the more traffic. The more traffic there is, the more construction. And on top of that, the more people moving here, which is all the time, feeds it. So it's just this cycle, this game of catch up that Austin is really cursed with. Unlike Dallas, unlike Houston, unlike even San Antonio, who all could grow according to their population growth as a city, they could grow bit by bit, measuring up parallel. Austin, city growth going like this, population growth, it'll never catch up. Maybe it will, but gosh, I predict in 10, 20, 30 years, Austin is going to be like a Los Angeles, like a San Francisco, just in terms of dense population. So yeah, I'm getting a little animated, but Austin loses. And what I can say about Dallas is what I just briefly mentioned. It grew according to the population, in harmony with its population, and it's much more of a well-oiled machine than Austin is. Austin's a bit of a mess, it's a little bit disorganized, and Dallas is just very natural. It really grew organically, and you're gonna find wider freeways, you're gonna have more options. I wouldn't say it's quite as good as Houston, because Houston now, which is humongous, right? Houston now has loops, and they have just a great system, light years ahead of what Austin would ever aspire to be. But Dallas is close enough. Dallas is really good with traffic. I mean, I gotta say, yes, you're gonna have rush hour anywhere you go. That is a given. So I'm kind of just, saying that as an assumption. But that in mind, Dallas is going to be much smoother. And if you are commuting, if that's part of your day-to-day life, keep that in mind. Part of what we pride ourselves in doing with people coming to Austin is we know it so well, we do this so often, that as soon as you tell us what your lifestyle is on that Zoom call and we figure out where you want to live, where you're going to work, things of that nature, we can place you in a good spot that makes that commute as easy as possible, that fits your lifestyle. But just overall, Austin loses, Dallas wins. How it is. All right, so coming up next on this list is number 8. Mate, and that would be a more fun subject, which is the subject of food. In Austin, it is taboo to even dare suggest that we don't have the best food in Texas. Now, I will say the best food in Texas is probably going to be San Antonio, but we have a video on Austin versus San Antonio, and this is a video on Austin versus Dallas, so sorry, but I'm gonna keep it consistent. When you're comparing Dallas and Austin in terms of food, we might have the better tacos, we might have the better avocado toast, but Dallas is going to have better food in general. I've touched on this before in our other Dallas video, but I'll say it again for those who haven't seen it and are watching this one first. Dallas has the reputation of fine dining, of brunch, of the popular trendy destinations and hotspots for the foodie culture, for the foodie network. It is where you go for business dinners. It is where you go when you're hungover after a late night and you just walk in and have a mimosa or a Bloody Mary, and everything in between. And I'm not saying that Austin doesn't have any of that to offer, but in comparison to Dallas, Austin's gonna have your breweries. Austin is going to have your pizza joints. Austin's going to have your mom and pop places that are very good, but it's not necessarily the hotspot fine dining restaurant culture. We could tell you about the cool, hip, trendy, unheard of coffee shop. We could tell you about the cool, hip, trendy, unheard of tea shop. We could tell you about the cool, hip, trendy, unheard of taco joint. And yes, some very well reputable fancy restaurants, don't get me wrong. But yeah, with Dallas, and that's the thing, it depends on what your flavor of lifestyle is. Everything I'm saying is consistent with the notion that Austin is eclectic, it's artsy, it's unique, it's soulful, it's weird, right? It's hip. And Dallas is just more traditional, a little more classy, good looking, by the way. I like the analogy that Houston is the hardworking, ambitious dad of Texas. Dallas is the good-looking mother of Texas, and then San Antonio and Austin are the two siblings, San Antonio being the elder, more responsible sibling, and Austin being the more lively, unpredictable younger sibling, if that really helps paint the picture in your head. So when you think of it as food, there you go. And it's more, I'm not saying what's right or wrong, I'm not saying Dallas is better, or maybe I am, but I'm saying that it's more about what fits your lifestyle. And yes, of course, I'm talking about the metro areas of both. Once you get into the suburbs, the two cities honestly are much more comparable. But just talking about the cultures and what they each have to offer, what they're each known for, food, safe bet, go to Dallas, get your 5-star gourmet Instagram photo dinners and lunches and brunches. Sorry, Austin, yet again. So coming in at number 9, this is a big one in my opinion, and that's going to be the subject of cost of living. The green stuff. Well, the money green stuff. In Austin, the green stuff can mean something very different. And spoiler alert, this is also going to be largely in favor of Dallas, and I know that this entire channel is called Living in Austin, so you would think that I'd be a little bit more biased, you think I'd show a little bit more favoritism, but I'm also incredibly blunt. I lack tact sometimes, and I tell it as it is. And I try to be as brutally honest as I can on this channel, because when you're moving somewhere, it's a big decision, and you don't need someone BSing you in a video saying, oh, everything's perfect, everything's sunny, you know, in a very obnoxious realtor-y way. This is a new wave. I'm a younger agent. I don't buy into the traditional ways of doing things. I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. Cost of living, Dallas, landslide. But let me explain. I will start with the notable details that are in favor of Austin, which are far and few, but I'll start with them, and then we'll get to how Dallas just blows it out of the water. So in terms of food and groceries, we're looking at the national average index. So everything, the national average is going to be 100, and we're gonna see how Austin and Dallas compare to the national average of 100 with their own percentage points. You'll see what I mean. So food and groceries in Austin, Texas are actually going to be 5% lower than Dallas. Small victory for Austin. Utilities, transportation are actually going to be about the same in terms of Dallas and Austin. You can expect to pay more or less the same amount of money, and that's because in Texas, you're going to drive a lot more than you might wherever you're moving from. Texas is very big, to point the obvious. It is the largest state in the country, and so unless you're living in the heart of the city, if you don't have a car, you are SOL, you're out of luck. And so Texas really capitalizes on that with their toll roads. Yes, the gas prices here in Texas are going to be much cheaper than pretty much, let's say, California or Oregon or something like that. It's going to be cheaper, same with New York, you know. But yeah, where they really get you is going to be with the toll roads. It's just how it is. So both Austin and Dallas are pretty comparable in that regard. So you're going to have similar numbers. But let's get to the juicy stuff. In Austin, Texas, you're going to have 20% higher taxes than Dallas. Now let me elaborate a little bit. What brings a lot of people to Texas is the alluring factor and reality that we have no state income tax. And yes, that's amazing, especially for companies that move here, which is why we're seeing such a swarm of them coming here to Austin. But something I've mentioned in many of my videos, if you've been watching along, or if this is your first one, I'm going to say it just in case. Property taxes are the stickler for living in Texas. That's what you don't hear. That's the other side of the coin of the no state income tax. Your property taxes are probably going to kill you. Now, you might find some rates as low as 2%, maybe if you're living, you know, really in the central area. But as soon as you go to the suburbs, the new developments, where the schools are great, where you've got your golf courses, where things are new and pretty, you're going to see tax rates as high as 2.5%, 2.75%, 3%, even above 3%. And what that means for you is, depending on how much your house is, you're gonna pay $6, $7, $8, $9, $10, upwards of $10,000 a year just on your property taxes. And a hidden fee within that, not tax related, but before I lose the thought, it's hot here. And that means when you're watering your lawn and you're cranking your AC between May and September every year, that's going to be quite a hefty expense that you might not be prepared for if you're coming from a cooler weather state. But back to the subject of taxes. As high as the property tax rates can be here in Texas, yes, Austin, 20% higher taxes overall, all things included, than Dallas. In addition, let's talk about median home prices. That's what it really boils down to if you're watching this video and you're thinking of moving. Austin is 27% higher, more expensive than Dallas for the median home cost. And Dallas, you're looking at around $270, give or take, and that weighs everything from suburbia to the city. And Dallas is actually pretty well known for having more affordable lofts and that lifestyle of living than Austin. You know, your condos here in Austin are going to be astronomical. So if you're wanting that downtown living, consider Dallas. But anyways, median home price in Dallas around $270, in Austin closer to $380,000. But if we're talking about those suburban homes in the Austin area, that average, instead of $380, could probably easily be $420, $450, maybe up to $500,000 now median because of the current market. I'm not saying that to dissuade you, because people close on their homes every day, and it's all about knowing how to get an offer accepted, which is another reason why we encourage you to call us. But yeah, with it being a tremendous seller's market right now, home prices are going up because a lot of these sellers can name their price, get multiple bids, pick the one that they favor the most, and there you go. And so last but not least, let's talk about the overall cost of living. So this is accounting for healthcare, this is accounting for transportation, this is accounting for utilities, this is accounting for real estate, etc. The city of Austin is 17% more expensive to live in than Dallas, Texas. It's in the numbers, so yeah, I mean, if you are someone who is not wanting to stretch the budget, so I'm putting my pen and paper down. If you are someone who's willing to stretch the budget and money's not as much of an issue for you, by all means, you might find better nature, better scenery, more of a vibrant lifestyle here in Austin. But if you are someone who might be a first-time home buyer, or if you're someone who just wants to save their money or whatever the reason might be, Dallas is going to be the more affordable option. Now, something I will say, because I've been really in favor of Dallas lately, I'm going to try and balance it out a little bit. Something I will say in favor of Austin is that if you are someone who invests, Austin is your choice, for sure, because the appreciation here is unlike anything we've seen before. Or if you're not an investor and you are moving, but you know that you're someone who has a job, who places you somewhere for 3 years, for 5 years, for 10 years, and you know eventually you're going to be moving somewhere else, also consider Austin, because same reasons as before, your house will appreciate for much more than you bought it for, and you're going to leave with quite a nice sum of money from that as well. Now finally, last but certainly not least, number 10 on this list of things to know when comparing Austin and Dallas is the subject of politics. And worry not, I'm not here to judge, I'm not here to choose sides, I'm here to tell it as it is from an objective point of view. Austin is the blue dot in the sea of red, that is Texas. It is the liberal capital of Texas. And Dallas, as I mentioned before, Walker, Texas Ranger, much more traditional, much more conservative. And I bring up politics because some people, they don't care. Other people, they do. And they want to live near people who share their same beliefs, their same ideologies, their same opinions on certain subjects, because we live in a climate of extremes now where you feel more than ever that less people are centrist and more people are on the extremes. And in terms of extremes, Austin, calling it as I see it, extremely liberal. I will note, however, when you leave the city, the metro area of Austin, and you go into the suburbs of Cedar Park, of Leander, of Georgetown, even Liberty Hill if you're getting even more north, it's going to be more mixed. I was fortunate to grow up in a neighborhood called Avery Ranch, which is in North Austin, and that neighborhood, come election time, when people would put the signs in their yard and say who they're gonna vote for, it really was pretty blended. I mean, you could walk down a street. I remember walking my corgi at the time. I'm looking at him because he's right there. Right there, I said very Texan. I can do the Texan accent, but I'm not Texan, you know what I mean? Anyways, walking my dog, I would see one house said X candidate, other house said Y candidate, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red. And that's very common as you get out of the central area. However, I will say when you're going even further north than North Austin and you're really going into the Georgetown, Liberty Hill, Leander areas, it's still balanced, I will say that, but you are going to see these big trucks with Confederate flags waving in the wind as they go 95 and a 75 on the toll road. Not all the time, that's not something you'll see every single day, but it's if you're living here, you're gonna see it, you know what I mean? So it's because once you leave that blue dot, you go to the medium and then you go to the red. And when it comes to Dallas, I'm not saying Dallas is all conservatives. I'm not saying Dallas is all right-wing people who vote for that, but it is more in the culture there as opposed to the college town of Austin. You know, college in this country, a lot of people in college tend to be more liberal. And so that was ingrained in the culture of Austin, but the culture of Dallas is much different. So no, it's not completely right-wing in Dallas, but it is going to be more of the norm than it is in Austin. And yes, you're going to have it very balanced in Dallas as well. I would say it's going to be more level-headed than Austin for sure, if anything leaning right, as I said. But I wanted to say that because, as I mentioned, when you're moving somewhere, not all people, but a good amount of people, they want like-minded people, and that reflects in the laws and the rules and the voting and the way that city runs itself, the way that city governs itself, policy and what have you. So keep that in mind. Whichever one you're moving to, I wanted just to bring that up. In today's day and age, it is more relevant perhaps than it was once upon a time. So keep that in mind. And if you're a centrist, disregard everything I just said. And so whether it's in the heart of the city, whether it's in suburbia, whether it's near the right golf course, whether it's near the right school district for your children, whether it's near the right nightlife if you are a young professional, whether it's the right spot for your commute to work, and everything in between, what we love to do and what we pride ourselves in doing is helping you find that perfect spot for you or you and your family, and make your transition when moving as easy and seamless as possible. Whether it's finding a house here for you to buy or doing that and helping you list your house where you live in addition, but the only way we can help you is by you reaching out to us. So again, shoot us an email, send us a text, give us a call, any day of the week, any time of day. It's what we love to do, it's what we're good at, so we do it. We've got your back when moving to Austin, Texas. And if you are leaning more towards Dallas and that is where you'd like to live, you can still reach out to us. We have the luxury of knowing an abundance of agents within the Texas area, and with this YouTube channel, we are connected to other like-minded people doing the same thing we are, so we'd be happy to connect you to someone who will take great care of you. And in addition, as I mentioned, be sure to subscribe to this channel because we do put out tons of new content every week, all in regards to living in Austin, Texas. Comment down below with agreements, disagreements, questions, or video ideas for us. Like the video to help us grow, support us, and tell us that we're doing a great job. And until the next video, you guys, we'll catch you later.